The Hinterkaifeck murders. This case takes us over to Bavaria, Germany in March of 1922. There were 6 people who lived and worked on the Hinterkaifeck farm. The family consisted of the parents, their daughter, and her 2 children, along with a male farmhand and a female domestic worker. On March of 1922, someone brutally murdered the entire family, and the case remains unsolved to this very day. What makes this crime so mysterious was the amount of planning that had to have gone into it. For example, the killer or killers stayed at the farm for several days prior to the murder to make sure that the family was home. They even turned off the electricity to the farm sometime between 8 p.m. and midnight on the night of March. They then waited until the next morning around 4 a.m. to carry out the attacks. Whoever attacked the family did so using an axe and a knife. The victims suffered multiple blows to the head and chest. The 2 children actually put up a fight and defended themselves as best as they could, but sadly, they were not successful. Police were called to the scene after someone found the farm animals roaming the streets of a nearby town. When police arrived to the scene, they discovered the entire family was dead. It's believed that the motive behind the crime was robbery, since many valuables were stolen from the home, including jewelry, money, silverware, and clothing. Investigators believe that the killer or killers may have even been targeting the family specifically for the fact that the father was a wealthy farmer. Over the years, more than 50 people came forward claiming to have witnessed the crime or having information on it. However, none of these tips led to any sort of conviction or even a suspect. To this day, nobody knows what happened to the family or who would have wanted them dead. The Beaumont Children disappearance. On January of 1966, 3 siblings named Jane, Arne, and Grant Beaumont left their family home in Adelaide, Australia. They planned to spend the day at the Glenelg beach, which was just a 15-minute walk away from their house. However, they never made it to the beach. At around 2:30 p.m., a witness spotted the children entering a car with 3 men and women. The witness assumed that the group was taking the kids to the beach, since that's exactly what most people would do. But later that evening, the children were nowhere to be found. A massive search effort was initiated involving thousands of volunteers who scoured the area, but the kids were nowhere to be seen. Police began questioning people who were near the area where the kids went missing, but there weren't many leads. One woman told police that she saw the kids at the beach around 5:30 p.m., but that was the last confirmed sighting of them. 3 weeks later, a fisherman found one of Grant's shoes on the shore, but it didn't have any fingerprints or DNA on it. Some people believe that the children ran away from home, but this is unlikely because Jane's diary contained entries for the next few days after she disappeared, and none of them contained anything about running away. Others believe that the children were kidnapped, but there were no ransom demands made. This case remains unsolved to this very day, and it's likely that we may never know what truly happened to the Beaumont children. The Mary Celeste. On December of 1871, the brigantine ship known as the Mary Celeste was discovered floating off the coast of the Azores Islands in the Atlantic Ocean. The ship was found in good condition, but there was no sign of its crew. The ship's captain, Benjamin Briggs, his wife, and their 2-year-old daughter, along with 4 crew members, were nowhere to be found. When the ship was discovered, there was no damage to it, and it appeared to be fully functional. There was also food and water on board, which ruled out the possibility of the crew being lost due to starvation or dehydration. What's really strange is that almost all of the cargo, which was mostly alcohol, was intact. If the crew had jumped ship, it's likely that they would have taken the cargo with them. The ship's log showed nothing out of the ordinary, with the last entry being on November 25th, 15 days before the ship was found. There were a few theories on what could have happened to the crew. Some say pirates, while others say a storm. But neither of those hold much water. Pirates wouldn't have left the cargo behind, and a storm couldn't have possibly kept the ship afloat without its crew. This case has remained unsolved for decades, and it's likely that we may never know what happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste. The disappearance of Maura Murray. On February of 2004, 21-year-old Maura Murray was a nursing student who was driving home to visit her family for Valentine's Day. She was driving her 1996 Jeep when she collided with a tree on a rural road in Haverhill, New Hampshire. When emergency services arrived on the scene, they noticed that the car's airbags had deployed and the windshield was shattered. However, they were unable to locate Maura anywhere. Her car was completely out of gas, which ruled out the possibility that she fled the scene. Her purse, keys, and cell phone were all found inside the vehicle, and there was no signs of a struggle. Police searched for her for days, but they were unable to locate her. Several witnesses claimed to have seen Maura walking along Route 112 after the accident, but she was never located. Maura's case received national attention, and more than 1,500 tips came into the investigation team. Despite the large amount of tips, none of them led to any significant leads. And the case remains unsolved to this very day. People believe that she may have been abducted, but there's no evidence to support this theory. Some people even believe that the crash wasn't an accident and that Maura intentionally hit the tree. However, this doesn't explain why she vanished. The Oakville Stranglers. In August of 1974, several victims were found strangled to death in Oakville, Washington. The victims varied in age but were mostly women. And the case remains unsolved to this very day. The murders shocked the nation, and people were outraged that someone would target young girls in such a manner. However, despite the outrage, the police were unable to find any leads in the case. None of the victims knew each other, and there was no obvious connection between them. All three lived within walking distance of each other, and all three were strangled with the same nylon cord. This led investigators to believe that the same person or persons were responsible for all three murders. The police believe that the killer or killers were targeting the victims based on their age and gender. This is evidenced by the fact that a similar crime had occurred in the area 2 years prior. Another young girl had been strangled to death. However, this case was never linked to the Oakville Stranglings. To this day, nobody knows who was responsible for killing these innocent girls. The Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer was a serial killer who operated in Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. He was responsible for at least 5 murders, but he claimed to have killed much more than that. The case remains unsolved to this very day. The police believe that the same person was behind all of the murders. This is supported by the fact that the victims were killed in a similar fashion, and the killer always seemed to appear at the same time of night. The victims were often parked in secluded areas when the attacks occurred. The killer would approach the vehicle and shoot both the driver and the passenger. He often used a .22 caliber firearm, and he would flee the scene before the police arrived. The killer was never caught, and he taunted the police with cryptic messages that he sent to the newspapers. He was known for his strange code, and the police were never able to decipher it. Even to this day, nobody knows who the Zodiac Killer was or what his motives were. But now it's time for you to speak up. Which of these cases was the most bizarre to you? Let me know down below. Go ahead and comment down below. Also, comment down below if you think any of these cases will ever be solved. I know I certainly hope so. But I've been your host today. And until next time, stay safe.